You are listening to the Sinister DreamCast Network.
So, what's the plan?
I'm gonna start shaking things up.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Don't say that. What? That? What? That?
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Tell him about the Twinkie.
What about the Twinkie?
Well, gentlemen, you have my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Hello, and welcome to the Insert Movie Reference Here podcast. I am one of your gracious hosts, Nick Kazina.
Gracious hosts?
Yes.
I'll be the judge of that. Joe. I'll be the judge of that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Joe Conniff. Also a host. Maybe gracious? I don't know.
We're letting them into our friendship, Joe. That's why
we're letting them in. After 141 episodes, we're finally like, listener, you can now be a part of this.
I mean, we do it weekly. I'm just saying.
Yeah. You know what we should ask the listeners to do, even though it'll make no sense, is to mail in questions through snail mail to us.
Yeah. And
by the time we'll get them, we won't be able. We'll have already recorded for that week's episode, so it'll be too late. But thank you for the mail.
Also, in honor of today's episode, I thought an unnecessary adjective was appropriate, given Miss Rowling's writing.
Yes, we are going to be talking a little bit J.K. Rowling today.
Yes,
which is appropriate because I feel like we did a Harry Potter video. We did a Harry Potter. What an absurd word to use in this medium. We did a Harry Potter episode once, but we talked exclusively about the movies, pretty much, right? Yeah. I mean, there really wasn't much talk about J.K. Rowling herself because the movies, although based on her writing, are not hers.
No.
Which is what makes this episode super duper interesting.
Yes, because Joe saw Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Yes.
So I have yet to see it. So we're going to be doing an Inside Out on that. But before that, we're going to talk a little bit of Harry Potter as well, like Joe said, because I have been listening to the audiobooks. I just finished Goblet of Fire this past week, so I have slightly more insight than I did the last time we did this. Especially because I don't feel like it really gets interesting until Goblet of Fire. So
that's very true, yes. And I would say it doesn't really pick up as in terms of for adult reading until Prisoner of Azkaban.
That's even debatable in the book.
Yeah.
I was actually a little disappointed in Prisoner of... Everyone gets up in arms about Prisoner of Azkaban, like, oh, they ruined that one. It was the worst. I'm like, I understand why they got rid of almost every single thing they did in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, It's always important to keep in mind that these books were originally meant for a young adult audience. And
starting out, yeah.
Yeah. And as the audience grew, she just decided that she would write with them. Which is kind of smart, but also a sort of in-the-moment sort of decision to make. It's sort of an in-history decision. So it's kind of a weird writing experiment, if you will. You know, I mean, these properties were basically made for a certain age demographic, and as the books more and more matured, you know, as the demographic matured, so did the content. And not that drastically, though. I think people throw that out of proportion a little bit. And I would say that actually it's more evident in the movies than it is the books.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, the tone and things like that. Like, I still feel like I could give, you know, the last book to a middle schooler, and the reading level's the same, is my point.
Yeah, it is
The
content.
reading level doesn't... It's just content, so... And it's not heavy concepts, either. It's not... It's a little heady at times, but not so much that you can't comprehend it.
It's not Matrix heavy. It's
It's
heady. It's more like darker. It's more like, for lack of a better term, real life situations.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a little more, and there's it's a little bit more, symbolism, and I think the plots get a little bit more complicated. That'd be about it.
My criticism of Rowling, because a lot of my favorite writer is Neil Gaiman, and Neil Gaiman writes very tightly.
Mm-hmm.
everything, like, American Gods is a very long book, but everything in American Gods has a point. Listening to these books, not everything has a point, and not everything has a point. Some people may argue that it's world building, but I would argue it's chuffa, as Bruce Willis would say. There's a lot. It's just there's a lot of things that I'm like, I don't care. There's a character in the books, Joe, a ghost named Peeves.
Yes.
That does not show up in the movies whatsoever, and I'm really happy about that. He plays prominently in Sorcerer's Stone in the book, and every single time he's on the page, I roll my eyes.
Yeah, I think there's also I think what Nick and I are getting at here is that writing in terms of novelization writing, which is something we don't talk much on this podcast, because this podcast is about movies. But I think that sort of writing really doesn't have rules the way script writing does. Script writing has rules where, it's a lot more technical, the writing. And you can get creative with script writing, don't get me wrong. You can entertain the reader, but you have to do it in a disciplined manner where you understand that if it doesn't serve a purpose to the visual aspect of what you're saying, then it doesn't serve a purpose. But in novels, that's not the case at all. You can literally just be writing bland details for just the sake of just shaping the whether it's the story world, the worldview of the character, or or perspective, what have you. Like, you can just say whatever you want. And it's one of those things that, because that freedom is there, it makes it a lot easier to write this way. And if you don't nail down your style, and if you don't nail down what you're trying to accomplish in your book early enough on, then you end up having these things that are just kind of runaway. And I think J.K. Rowling, what's interesting is, as much as her demographic grew up reading her demographic also and fan base grew up, watched her as a writer and an author grow as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's very evident in her writing. And obviously, the more you write, the more you'll improve. But it's pretty clear early on, she was somewhat new at this still. She wasn't a full-blown pro,
It's painfully obvious in Sorcerer's Stone. It's very, very obvious in Sorcerer's Stone. And like you said, Joe, you can see her getting better at it. She figures out how to use... She figures out the medium better. And dear listener, if you remember on Pottermore, there's tons of shit on there that she writes. That's pretty good. Like, once you get sorted into your house, you get a welcome message from some character who is also part of that house, and she writes in that character, and it writes well, and it reads well.
And let me also just say that if you are a Harry Potter fan, what is the term?
The term is Potterhead, Joe.
Potterhead, sorry. I was going to say Harryhead or something. I was like, that sounds terrible. I shouldn't say that out loud.
I like to refer to them derogatorily or pejoratively as wand-fuckers.
Wand-fuckers, sure, yeah. I'm not going to say that I'm not a fan at all of Harry Potter. That'd be completely untrue. I actually very much enjoy the stories, and the movies are hit and miss, obviously, but the books are still very enjoyable. Very enjoyable. But if you are a Potterhead or a wand fucker or a wand wanker,
ooh, wand wanker, that's a good one.
Yeah. Well, it's if you read the Philosopher's Stone, then you are a wand wanker. But if you read Sorcerer's Stone, then you're a wand fucker.
There you go.
There we go. We're breaking down the science of these derogatory terms towards it. Anyhow, if you consider yourself of that group, be very, very, very thankful, and take it from a couple of Star Wars fans. Be very thankful that your creator is so actively invested and currently invested still in your franchise that you love.
Yeah.
And she is not going to destroy it. She's just going to continue to keep it going. and with integrity.
Yeah.
As opposed to us, we had a creator who basically acted like a king who doesn't need to do anything in his kingdom except eat grapes for a long time.
He delegated a lot of the storytelling.
Yes, and then out of nowhere come up with, and finally like get us all excited and come up with just a bunch of junk, and then sell the farm.
Sell the kingdom
Yeah.
to the bigger kingdom next door.
To the highest bidder, essentially. Now that worked out, thank God. We are very lucky that it worked out and thankful that it did. But we had a tyrant as the head of the franchise that we held near and dear to our hearts. So be very thankful that you have J.K. Rowling, because it's very rare this day and age. Actually, it's actually more common for somebody like her to sell out at this point and just do what George Lucas did and just sell it off and take the bigger paycheck. It'd be a lot less work for her. Yeah.
Agreed. Have you read the books, Joe?
I've read a majority of them.
Okay.
I can't off the top of my head tell you which ones I skipped. I would really have to read the synopsis of each one and go, oh yeah, this one I read. I know I read the first 3. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna say there's 2 I haven't read.
Okay.
I've definitely read the last one.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you. After that, that's why I had so much trouble with the movies too, placing everything, because the movies are a confounded mess compared to the books. It's just like, it's incredible how big of a mess the movies are to the books, especially in the middle there. And then they kind of find a way to pull things together. It's an interesting thing that happened there with the movies. I think we talked about that. It's sort of... There was a concerted effort in the first couple movies that they wanted to keep some of the core story going, and then it kind of really started to tail off a little bit.
The first 2 movies are pretty one-to-one to the book.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the extended version of the movies. They're very one-to-one.
The plot points are, I think, is the point. And then as you start to venture in further to the movies, you just...
You can't, at the same time.
You gotta make a fucking movie here. You can't make a book. You can't make Lord of the Rings again.
Goblet of Fire almost was split into 2 movies.
Yeah, I remember that.
The only reason why they didn't is they finally... I think it was a week or 2 before they were going to make the official announcement that Goblet of Fire was going to be part 1 and 2. They were able to sit down and go, oh wait, we figured this out. If we just take everything that doesn't pertain to Harry and cut that out, it will work.
Yeah. So, J.K. Rowling has moved... Not that she's moved on from writing novels, but she has moved
she also writes...
she
also writes under a male pseudonym.
What do you mean? For...
No. She writes adult novels under a male pseudonym.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what that is, though.
I don't know it off the top of my head. I know... one of her books is called No Vacancy or something. Oh, Casual Vacancy.
Okay.
There's a lot of fucking in it, apparently.
Huh. I mean, you gotta... If you're writing these fucking PG, maybe PG-13 style books for a while, you're kind of, pushed over the edge sometimes.
Yeah, she can't write as Cho slowly sucks Harry's cock. I don't think it's gonna work.
I mean, I bet she's written those words out and then just deleted them.
Yeah.
How many times has she probably written something absolutely that if you read it on the page, you'd be appalled that these characters it's just you're what? Harry did what to who? But I'm sure she's written it out just to do it,
Yeah.
But then just deleted it because it probably feels good to just do that, especially these characters that at some point you no longer really have control of anymore.
Yeah. So.
But she's moved into... Well, I wanted to say she's moved into screenwriting after... 7 movies have been made about her books that
8.
8 movies have been made about her... Yeah, because the last one's split into 2. 8 movies have been made about her... Well, yeah, I mean, so... And she didn't write any of those movies. She was a, creative consultant, things like that, but she didn't really... She does not credit as a screenwriter on any of those movies. This is the first movie that she's a credited screenwriter, and she's the only screenwriter on Fantastic Beasts. So it's... And the reason I think we're talking about this is because it's probably a very, very interesting transition, and it's not an easy one either. You can ask Stephen King this, probably. Writing movies is not the same as writing novels. And writing movies about characters and things like that you're already sort of familiar with is probably also difficult, which I think is why she wrote this movie. And none of the Harry Potter movies, or she didn't write a movie about a character that you have already seen portrayed.
Yeah. And
that was smart of her, because we've never seen Newt Scamander in any other way except now on screen as played by Eddie Redmayne. Which is, the best way to probably go about it for her, because if she had decided to write any type of story based on a character that we've already seen portrayed on screen, she'd be dealt with the challenge of writing that character the way it has been written in the movies. She doesn't know how to do that. She never wrote those characters for the movies. She's only written them for her books. And that makes this movie, I think, at least in the cinematic vacuum, very unique. Because it's based on a book series, or it's a spin-off of a book series. But it's really a spin-off of a movie series, in all reality here.
Yeah.
Because the book is... Fantastic Beasts is not an actual book. I mean, it's a written piece of literature in our world and in the Harry Potter universe, both as a textbook. Neither of which really telling a story. I think that the textbook in our world has some story elements to it, but it's not a story. Not the story that we've seen played out on screen here for a Fantastic Beast. So it's and in the Harry Potter universe, it is just a textbook. Yeah. We know this, and the character exists in that universe, and that's what it's based off of. So it's a spin-off. It's a very twisted meta thing going on here.
Yeah.
If you twist the metaverse into the Harry Potter world being the real world. And we're sort of seeing this story play out in a spin-off sort of fashion, but it's based on a book, but not really. The story is a historical tale, essentially, of Harry Potter, which makes it that much more wonderful, because it is diving deeper into the Harry Potter world, It's set in the past from whenever Harry Potter is. So this is all before. I believe this takes place the year that Voldemort is born.
Yeah. It's the next the series of movies apparently is going to be dealing a lot with Grindelwald, yes. Dumbledore's lover.
Yes.
So,
and then it has a lot to do with this
the first Dark Wizard uprising.
Yeah. So it's very interesting, and I'm not going to give anything away about the ending of Fantastic Beasts because Nick hasn't seen it yet. It just came out this weekend. A lot of people haven't gotten out to see it. It's fine. I get it. I'm not going to give away any spoilers. And to be honest, there's really only one thing in the movie that you're like, whoa. But even that, and it happens at the end, I will say this about this movie, and it is very apparent. Nick, you'll notice this about the structure of this movie is fascinating. The structure of this movie is very fascinating because they don't necessarily... She doesn't exactly write it in a traditional structure. There is a route that she could have taken in this movie that would have made it very simple. It would have been a simple sort of tale about this guy just trying to get back his, his creatures that have escaped in New York, and he's just trying to get him, and antics ensue. It could have just been that story. But actually, she balances that A story with the B story so well that actually they flip-flop. And you'll notice in the movie, Nick, I know you'll notice, but a lot of people, you should pay attention to how the A and the B story sort of intertwine and overlap one another to the point where you actually, at times, the story of him trying to get back his magical creatures gets relegated at times to another part of the story. And then, as the story starts to intersect with as the A story and the B story intersect, they sort of flip-flop again. The problem with this is that you can tell at the end of this movie that J.K. Rowling has never written the third act of a movie before. And for those of us that have ever written the third act of anything that is cinematic, you'll understand that it is profoundly difficult.
Yes, fuck endings.
Fuck endings. Fuck them so hard. And I did not expect her to get it the first try. No one should. And she didn't. You're going to see the end of this movie and go, this is a bit of a mess. And it is. The ending's a bit of a mess. It falls into... You have to suspend your disbelief at times at the ending here, because for the sake of wrapping up a 2-hour-long movie. And that's just what happens, guys. That's just what happens when you write a movie that at the end you just go, oh, that's right, we have to end this part. We have to end everything before we end the whole thing. Mm-hmm. You know, and to do that, you kind of have to put it all together, and you have to put it in the final. You have to choose a location where it all kind of ends at, which always seems to be a little bit coincidental and a little bit rushed and a little bit silly that it's all happening here. And that's kind of how I feel the ending is. It's kind of, and like the twist with the one character is you're kind of like not really surprised by it at all. It's kind of it's a little obvious. And I don't think she's trying to fool you with it either. I think it's just one of those things that, and Nick, you know this, sometimes you're writing for people that are just stupid and you expect them to go, what? You know, but for most of your audience, you expect them to have not been surprised, which you're fine with them not being surprised by it. You just hope that the context of everything is sound. And that's at least it. At least the context of everything is sound. Like, nothing comes out of left field where it's like, well, you just made that up to end this. Like, there's nothing like that. Okay. It's all still intertwined nicely. It just feels... rushed isn't the right word. It's not a fair word to use at the ending, but you'll see what I mean. It's a little patchy. So, but it's still very good. It's just not smooth. It's just not a very smooth ending. It's like, it's over, you know? You're kind of anticlimactic, I guess.
Okay.
Which is fair. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's very difficult to end a movie in a climatic way. It's why some movies are great and some movies are just good, you know?
Yeah.
But that being said, I congratulate J.K. Rowling on her transition, because I think she did a phenomenal job. She did something that I commend her for, and that is the fact that she wrote it in a structure that was not necessarily... She took a risk. Instead of writing within the 3-act structure just strictly, right? It would have been easy to do that for her. And it'd been easier for her to just go about it like hitting her plot points and the inciting incident, something that to her as an author would make sense. She'd be like, oh, that's easy. Writing movies is easy. I can write movies now. You know, instead of doing that, she actually decided, no, I'm not going to just take this very straight line. She took risks with it a little bit. And she decided, like I said, to flip the A and the B plot at one point in time and kind of distract you away from, which is something I would never advise anybody to do. If you were teaching somebody screenwriting, you never advise them to do that, especially early on. You'd never advise them to do that, because that's just, you're going to end up with something convoluted and confusing. You know, The Matrix Matrix is a great example of this. The Matrix did this, you know? You just flip the A and the B plot, and you just confuse your viewer about what are we focusing on here? What are we supposed to care about? But she did this actually quite masterfully. And she did it in a way that probably shouldn't have worked, but it did. And it clearly shows that she said, no, I'm not going to pretend to be a screenwriter at this point in my career. I'm still just going to write it. And I'm sure she got help. I'm positive she did. An uncredited help. Yeah, she's got resources. There's a massive amount of resources within the studio system that she could have used. I'm sure she used them, and I'm sure they advised her to use them. Point being, though, she didn't fold under those advisors under certain things, though. She still cared about, and at the end of the day, I thought, what's his name? The director,
David Yates.
David Yates. I wanted to say David. I didn't want to be wrong. I knew it was Yates. He, you know, picked up right where he left off with the last Harry Potter movies that he did. His production design, his camera work is just terrific, and he's really, really improved his... I don't know if they just have a different visual effects guy, or if he's just learned some more stuff. They did a great job with visual effects in this movie too. I mean, it had to be, I think. I'm sure they... Because I never considered the Harry Potter movies to be great in terms of visual effects.
They always seem like an afterthought, which is weird in a magical movie.
Yeah, I agree. They're always okay. I was never like impressed by it, but in this movie, it's quite impressive. They do a thorough job, and it finally, to me, really made it really brought out the magical world, and it sort of I think it's because it was on the backdrop of New York, and it was sort of our world, right? It was it's living in America and bringing magic here and not having this backdrop of
Britain.
Of Britain. Yeah, where to us it's with castles and stuff. It seems magical, but anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you're of course you set a wizard movie here. Of course, it already looks the part. But to bring it to New York, I felt like that was something that she was missing a lot in her. In the movies before and in her stuff in general, is that it was always with the backdrop of Europe or London or England or some place that just to us the American viewer already saw it that way anyhow. So for it to be on this backdrop, it sort of brought the magic out more.
Okay.
And it made it more we're not in a magical world. These are magical things. And it made it more, I don't know, it made it more, because it was more constricting, because only the magical things were going to come out of this case, or out of these certain people that were wizards, it made it more exciting. Because it was kind of like they were superpowers, or that they were these things that were, almost like the way you felt whenever you saw the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. These things shouldn't be here. They are out of place.
Gotcha.
And it just seems more magical when you take it out of its environment. So that's something that I think made it work so well. Yeah, and the performances are just terrific as well, because
how's Colin Farrell?
You know what? And I don't know. I joked with Eugene about this, and I remember them I imagine the producers were think of one actor that you could never imagine talking about magical things on screen in a serious manner. You'd be Colin Farrell. That's the guy I want, because I was actually, and I hate Colin Farrell when he does an American accent.
Yeah.
I just can't stand his American accent. He's very boring.
I feel like he's made fun of his own American accent before.
Yeah, and to be totally honest with you, as a result of all of that, the fact that he's kind of stiff with his American accent, it adds to this character, and this character is very overbearing, in a sort of unsettling way.
Okay.
You'll see what I mean. And he's an abuser. So in this movie, it has actually really a lot of heavy social commentary in it. A lot more than I was prepared for. Newt Scamander is he's sort of an animal lover. He's sort of standing up for the rights of these magical creatures. So there's social commentary on that, and in terms of animal protection and environmental protection in that sense. And then there's also this other storyline in terms of about abuse and abuse survivors and dealing with your abuser and things like that. There's some really heavy commentary in this movie that I think, and it's early. It all comes pretty early on, and it sets the tone pretty early in this movie that you're okay, this is not what I kind of expected. And I think that's what made this movie so good to a lot of people, is the things that are unexpected about this movie are kind of heavy. And they're heavy in a thinking kind of way, and in an emotional sort of way. So that's what I think is making this movie work so well. And then on the backdrop of magic in New York City, and you have this character that we don't know yet and has his own story, and not just does he have his own story, but everything we learn about him and where he comes from and what he does makes us more curious about a world we've already been introduced to. That's the other thing. You don't see Hogwarts in this. We only stay in New York in this movie. we just allude to things like Hogwarts and another school, which I won't spoil anything, but there's talk of another school in this movie as well.
Are you talking about the American school?
Mm-hmm.
They already announced it.
Oh, they did. Okay, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to spoil anything because
Joe, I've already been sorted into my house in Ilvermorny. Everyone knows about it. It's fine.
It's okay. I don't know where everyone is. But yeah, they confirmed some things as well, which is exciting. But in terms of location and stuff like that. So yeah,
Ilvermorny's in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. And I believe they in the original textbook of Fantastic Beasts, and they allude to it in the movie, that they confirmed that Hogwarts is in Scotland.
Oh yeah, everyone knows that, Joe.
Okay, yeah. But that was... Well, no, I'm saying from Fantastic Beasts, that's where it was confirmed. Mm-hmm. Like the textbook. And then they allude to it in the movie as well. But what's interesting is, like, all of these things that you learn allude to a world you've already seen, but in a different era. Mm-hmm. So you're just going back to that old sort of, like, Star Wars, like, just dropping nuggets of information on you. You just go, what is that? Ooh! Like, you know, you get excited about the potential of what it could be. And you're doing it with a world you've already been introduced to as well. This isn't a world that you don't know about. You're not like, what's Hogwarts? Like, you've seen all this shit, right? But you're being teased with it again. And you're really being teased with it for the first time, really, because, like, you know, Harry Potter, like, goes to Hogwarts, you know, the first movie, like, the first book, and all those things like that. All that stuff is kind of shown to you. Now you're kind of being teased with it, something you really haven't been through, and you're being teased to it in a different era, where you really don't know. I mean, they talk about Dumbledore in this movie, and you're like, that's right, Dumbledore. And you're like, of course Dumbledore exists, you crazy maniacs. But people got, like, giddy and excited just hearing Dumbledore's name again, and just hearing that information, it just brings you more into the world, and you just want to go step further into it. But this movie doesn't let you step entirely into it. So this movie works as a tease as well, and it does that pretty artfully. So, I mean, obviously, if you were a Harry Potter fan, you've probably already seen the movie, but even if you were a casual fan like Nick and I would highly suggest. I did not expect to see this movie as early as I did. I definitely want to go out to see it. I thought for sure I'd see Doctor Strange before I'd see this.
I'm not gonna lie, I was really surprised when you texted me and said I saw Fantastic Beasts. I was like, wow, really?
As I was texting, I'm like, Nick's gonna be. I actually kind of like forgot. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I have a movie podcast I could talk about this on. And I text you, I'm like, Nick's gonna be surprised that I saw this movie, because I'm not the type of person to go out opening weekend on anything. Although I saw it on a Sunday night, so you know, stay clear of the. Well, I was off this Sunday. I'm never off on Sundays.
Okay.
So I had a Sunday night, so I used it to go see one of those movies that's out.
Cool. One of the things I am curious about, Joe, how deep do they go into the Magical Congress? Because the world-building nerd that I am, I want to know about the Magical Congress and how for lack of a better term, the American wizarding government is set up in comparison to the Ministry of Magic.
Pretty heavily, because that other story that I was talking about had a lot to do with the corruption within that Congress.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, their situation in... there's sort of a smaller story going on about that Congress and how they handle things and their hypocrisy that goes on, and the way they sort of treat the Muggles, or as they call it in America, the No-Maj. They have a different term for it in America, which I thought which was a great detail, because you're like, yeah, they'd probably call it something different.
See, yeah, I always thought that, because I guess Muggle is a European term, because in Goblet of Fire, I feel like the other schools use Muggle as well. So.
Yeah, no, they call them in this movie. They're called No-Maj. Which is obviously short for no magic. No-Maj.
No-Maj. Okay.
Yeah, and it's
that's a very American term.
Exactly, and they talk culturally about how the American culture with dealing with non-magic people is they have stricter rule. We have stricter rules over here, and all these different things. So it's very interesting. Yeah, they do a great job of. There's a great job here of re-world building the wizarding world in America, and in sort of how American customs for magic and wizardry is. There's this really cool, as you probably know, but the basis of the dark forces in this movie stems from Salem.
Okay.
Salem has a lot to do with the early goings of how a lot of these dark forces were created. So there's talk of that. Also, do not get confused. There are no flashbacks in this movie, and I need to bring that up to anybody, and just so you know, because at some point in this movie, they introduce I guess what you want to call the antagonists of the movie early on, or who's supposed to make you believe they're the antagonists or going to be a part of that. The way that they dress and stuff, I thought that it was a flashback. Okay. And the tones are very dark in this movie, so it was hard to tell if they had changed the tone to something that was... There are no flashbacks in this movie, just keep that in mind going into it, because it confused me for a little while. Because they didn't really cross over characters in scenes with those characters for a little while, and then when they did, you were like, I was confused for a second, like, oh, I thought this was like I thought I was seeing like a backstory of a character that we already saw or something. Like, I was confused. Just so you know, there's no flashbacks, backstory, visual scenes in this movie. So, going into it, keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. Just to avoid that. Like I said, this movie flip-flops its storylines a little bit, and it confused... For a little while there, for about 15 minutes, I was full-on confused if we were switching eras in this movie. Outside of the year that it was already being... I can't even remember the year that this is set in.
Isn't it 1930?
I think it's like late 20s, early 30s, yeah.
Okay.
So... But I thought that they switched... At one point, I thought they flashed back to like the 1860s or something. At one point.
Okay.
Like, I was full-on confused. But then eventually it becomes pretty odd. Like I said, they all end up in the same place at the end. You know, I was... At some point, I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't flashbacks. But yeah, just that's my the disclaimer for this movie. No flashbacks in this movie. So if you think you're in a different era, you're not. It's just the whole movie set in a different era, and it was hard to tell what was happening there.
So is Ilvermorny just mentioned they don't go there?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just this movie is its own thing. It really is its own thing. You could watch no Harry Potter in your life. You could not have read a book, not seen a movie, not even seen a trailer. You could go into this movie and really not be lost. It doesn't introduce things so crazy to you that you can't keep up at all. Like, nothing about... Like, this movie is a standalone movie. And it's interesting, because we're going to get, like, 5 of them that she's going to write in this.
Yeah.
And I don't really full-on understand what she's writing. I'm like, is the next one going to be Newt Scamander 2, or it's not... Or it's going to be a different character that we're going to get? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Do you know?
I don't know, because I heard that it's... the next one's not in America, it's back in England.
Right. So are we going to go back to England with Newt Scamander? Or are we going to take on a totally new character that we're going to kind of look at? It's interesting. These are like the anthology movies of Harry Potter, but I mean, and she's going to write them all.
Yeah, and Yates is directing them all.
Yeah. So we're going to get this same thing, you know, the same style, the same look throughout all of them. It's not going to be quite like the anthology movies, but it is in the sense that it's not going to directly affect Harry Potter per se.
Well, it's also kind of like the prequels, because like from my understanding, Voldemort's going to play a part in... Well, Tom Riddle is going to be playing a part in the last couple of them.
Yeah. That makes sense. Depending on how it... I mean, it'll be interesting, because this is a totally... You think about it, this is a film franchise now. If we're talking about what... I don't know what we'll call this franchise at the end. I'm sure it'll have its own name. And I'm sure the Potterheads will think of a way to differentiate the Harry Potter movies from these movies in some sort of term or lingo. But it's really interesting because the first ones were based on books, obviously, and they were turned into movies that were very successful. And now these ones are being written by the author of those books as movies, but as just movies. There's really not text to support it. I mean, there's like I said, there's the textbook itself for Fantastic Beasts, but that's sort of the nugget of information that this stems from. You know, these other movies are just going to be movies. Mm-hmm. It's really kind of going to be its own thing in movies. Like, no other movie will have this sort of layout, I guess. This sort of pre-laid foundation of information, both in text and cinematically.
Yeah.
And then to also have these movies that are just going to be movies and just going to be cinematic, works. You know, they're not going to have tentpole. Well, they're going to have tentpole because of the Harry Potter tentpole, but the content is not going to be based around a text. So these movies are just going to be brand new original stories that are just going to be movies. And we talk about this all the time. Like, this might be the closest thing you can get at this point to, besides Star Wars, is movies based on movies now.
Yeah.
Is a spin-off of a film franchise that was based from a book. There's a lot. It took a long time to get here.
Yeah. 8 movies.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be its own thing. Like, you can't just come out with stuff like this. Like, this is a very unique scenario, I feel.
Yeah.
That's just poised and guaranteed for success.
I mean, there's also an excellent chance in the meantime, while this is coming out, they're going to adapt Cursed Child into a movie as well.
Yeah.
Which haven't heard good things.
Yeah. Yeah, no. But, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what more to say about it. I mean, the movie's, again, as we say on this podcast, the movie's worth your money. But, you know, if you're not a huge Harry Potter fan and you're not super into this stuff, it's also not a movie that I feel like must be seen on the big screen either.
Gotcha.
Like I said, the visual effects are fantastic. They're good, but, like, this isn't. Yeah, the story and the information in there, like, the thing that drives this movie is not really the visual effects. Like I said, there's a lot of heavy information. There's a lot of thinking going on. There's a lot of emotional pull in this movie by itself. And, you know, there's not... And you know what's interesting? The love story that goes on in this movie really isn't there. It's really forced, actually, a little bit.
Okay.
Apparently they cut a lot of scenes for the love story between Eddie Redmayne and... what's-her-face? I don't know that actress's name.
I didn't know the female actress, so
yeah.
I haven't been going that in depth. I just know Colin Farrell and Eddie Redmayne are in it.
Her name's Poppy in the movie, but you know, that's like, you know, and then Dan Fogler, who's like the goofy comic relief guy, is awesome in this movie as well.
Good.
He's very entertaining. He holds it up pretty well, and actually his love story is actually the love story in this movie. But yeah, the Eddie Redmayne love story in this is really kind of forced, and I feel like they cut a lot of the scenes from it because it's sort of just like we don't see. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's the male and the female, and obviously there's an attraction, but there's never really. It's just sort of like infatuation.
Gotcha. You were saying that, you know, there's a lot of heavy. Is there any trigger warnings for our more sensitive listeners out there?
It doesn't go over the edge.
Okay.
No, I would not say.
Is it just spoken about and not shown, or is it shown?
Yeah. There's nothing crazy there, and I think, you know, there's underlying information. It's not explicit.
Okay.
With the abuse aspect, but it's very much there. Yeah, nothing is even really like. There's a punch in the face, you know, but a lot of it's sort of also like there's a grand symbolism of emotional outburst in this movie. So and suppression. So that's kind of there anyhow. It's kind of like I said, the information's there, but it's not explicit. She writes it in a way that you get the idea, and it's not like you need to go. She doesn't feel like she needs to go over the edge with it. It's pretty obvious what's going on.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't feel like there's, I mean, I'm also speaking from a perspective where I don't have that emotional trigger, so that's why they're triggers, because they're unique individual things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Literally, depending on the person, I don't know what's going to set them off, but ultimately, to me, there's nothing in this that really, like, takes you too far. But yeah, there's nothing graphic.
Gotcha. Good to know. Well, I'll have to go see it, and then we can have a spoilerific episode then.
Yeah. Well, by that time, if you haven't seen it, it's your fault. You know, you got to get out there. You got to see these movies if you want to be able to see them and talk about them and hear about them.
Yeah. Well, I'm good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm honestly surprised it's getting so well received, because Potterheads are notoriously fickle.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the fact that she wrote it has a lot to do with that too.
See, that sometimes that hurts, because Potter fans also have a love-hate relationship with J.K. Rowling.
That's true. But it sort of feels like I said, they should appreciate the fact that they have a creator that gives a shit. She could jump ship, and instead she's just putting out more. That being said, I think there is that aspect of it. It's like, well, she sort of curated this. You know, she gave us this thing, and now there's these movies that are coming out, and they're just going to be movies. They're not based on books. She should be writing them, and she is. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of responsibility there for the intellectual property, I think. Because she could just cash out. She could just be lazy and be like, yeah, make cartoons or whatever. Like, seriously. Like, Potterheads don't realize how good they have it. They don't have a ton of fucking content. They don't have a ton of it. But it's a book series. Like, you know, like it. You got the books. The books lasted you a really long time of entertainment. You got all the movies. All the books are turned into movies. Not all great, you know. And now you're gonna get 4 more movies now after this one. Like, you have a lot of you have a lot of stuff to go off of here. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they're not selling out this brand with, like I said, cartoons and TV shows and all this stuff. Like, you could be overloaded with so much content that it's just ignorable, much like Star Wars fans are dealing with now. That there's actually more content in Star Wars right now to ignore than there is to consume.
Yeah.
And that's why people aren't watching Rebels. That's why people aren't reading the comic books or what have you, you know. Even though all this stuff is canon.
Yeah.
And it would have been held sacred in the 90s. We'd have gone nuts. If you had told me Shadows of the Empire was canon, we'd have lost our shit. But they never said it. They never said the EU was canon. That's whenever people freaked out that it was denounced as canon, people freaked out. But it's like, that was never accepted as canon.
It was, I think it was called a canon. Yeah, because there was like 5 levels of canon. Where's Gina? Gina can explain the...
Probably, yeah. He's at work, unfortunately. I would literally go get him, and I'm sure he'd all give us a dissertation on it. But we don't have that much time. And, oh, by the way, folks, sorry. You thought you were going to get a whole episode of us talking about Harry Potter and staying away from Star Wars. We just can't do it.
No, we got to bring it to what we understand and what we know, man. Because that's also an interesting... I found this out talking to early 20 folks, the millennials that are in the millennial bees, as I like to refer to them. This is their Star Wars.
Pretty much.
Like, Harry Potter's their Star Wars. I've actually heard them say that Harry Potter is ours, which I thought was interesting because it's our generation, people in their 30s that grew up with the books, that were there from the beginning and were literally like the appropriate age every single time the books came out.
I think it's because that generation was so young they didn't see any of the flaws in any of it. It's like that group of people that love, you know, the prequels. Like, they literally can't even comprehend if there are flaws. They're just enjoying it in their childhood. So it just, what it ends up doing is falling back into that nostalgia realm, you know, instead of it being shown through clear eyes of what it actually is. And there's things from our generation I'm sure we look up upon and we're like, that was amazing because we saw it as children. We just couldn't see the flaws in it. And the generation ahead of us was like, it was okay. It was intended for them originally. So I think that has a lot to do with it. It was intended for our generation as it was happening in the era, but the younger generation that would consume it as movies and as books later, whenever they were able to reach that reading level, they were already ingrained in the nostalgia of it. They had already seen the movies. Like, many of that generation probably saw the movies, then read the books.
Yeah. And
probably saw the movies and were just enamored with them, and just like, wow, cool, there's books. And then they read the books, and the books were even better than the movies, as opposed to the other way around. Our generation read the books, and we're like, the books are great. And then we saw the movies, and we're like, the movie sucks, and then you're like, fuck the movies. And then, that's it. And then we have this, like, more of a tainted view of an aspect of it. And then, like, people read the ending, and there were mixed reviews about the ending of the whole series. So you were kind of a part of that debate and all that stuff. You're part of the turbulence of it. As opposed to the younger generation, they're just like, they just love it. It's beloved. It's only beloved.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Joe, I think it's time for the vault.
The vault! Do you have a movie?
I do. I just have to get the year real quick.
Ah, yes, the old feisty year. The thing that always escapes me. Even the current one at times.
Yeah, I got one. Do you have one, Joe?
I do.
Okay. You went first last week, so I'll go first
Sure.
this week. This is actually we don't typically do this, but I feel like it is appropriate. This is a direct result of what we just talked about. Which is it's a documentary from 2014 called Mudbloods. That is about the what they call Muggle Quidditch, which is the real life Quidditch, and also a little bit about the culture and about the early 20-somethings that I'm referring to that see Harry Potter as theirs, and how there are Harry Potter rapping groups. Is that the proper term for rapping? Is it rapping group, Joe?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sure. I'm no expert, so I'll just agree to whatever you just said about rapping.
They sampled some of it. It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's very bad. I'm sorry, but Harry Potter does not work with swearing. It just doesn't. But it's an interesting, and it goes into like this college phenomenon of Muggle Quidditch, or Nomad Quidditch since it's American. But it's on Netflix. It's actually it's interesting. It makes a little bit more sense to me than Magical Quidditch, because I always have a big problem with Magical Quidditch because if you pick the golden snitch, you probably are gonna win. So it's too many points. There's not much strategy involved in it. So it always kind of bothered me. The snitch in Muggle Quidditch is only worth 30 points. So I feel like that makes a little bit more sense to me. But I'm also amazed that there is no one out there that is tried to make quaffles. They just use like that seems like Spalling or Mitre or Nike. Like, it seems like a missed opportunity to make quaffles. Like, you probably make a shit ton of money if you make a fucking real life quaffle. Because they just use volleyballs for the quaffle and dodgeballs for the bludgers, which makes sense because you can't enchant a bludger. But it's an interesting little documentary. It's not super well made, but it's dealing with interesting subject matter in relation to this relatively new fan base that is now just maturing. Like we said, our generation, the millennial A's, were the ones that grew up with the Harry Potter books, but it doesn't seem like our generation has taken to and has taken ownership over the Harry Potter universe as much as the younger millennials have. And it's peering into that because Muggle Quidditch is very much a thing on college campuses right now. So it's interesting in that respect. So if you have any interest in the Harry Potter and the greater wizarding world, it's definitely worth your time to check it out. So it's called Mudbloods.
I feel like that sport, if you want to call it a sport, there's like an imaginary aspect to it. Like you have to kind of pretend that you're playing a sport that is suspended in the air. Like there's like there's like rules that you're just like, why don't we just run around? Like why don't we just figure out a way to play this game on the ground regularly and not in a like. I think there's an aspect of it that like they need to create some sort because they don't want real athletes to play it. So they need to create these rules that make somebody just mentally get frustrated with the rules and quit. Like any sane person with like the ability to play sports would just go, it doesn't make any sense. I'm done with this game. It's like, good, then that guy can't destroy us at this game.
Yeah, actually one of the rules of Muggle Quidditch is you must have one hand on your broomstick at all times.
Yeah, it's absurd. Okay.
But like I said, it's an interesting documentary that explores it. It looks fairly fun, but they also take it real serious. There's one college in upper New York that they take Muggle Quidditch so seriously that because there is a World Cup of Quidditch, it's really just Americans. No one internationally plays this, I guess, or participates. But the one college, Muggle Quidditch is such a big deal there that they have a tournament in the college, and the team that wins that tournament is the team that represents the college in the World Cup. Yeah.
Interesting. You'd think that'd be something that would have picked up outside of the United States as well, somehow, though.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't. I mean, there were no other teams that weren't American in the documentary that showed up at the World Cup, so...
Yeah, well, travel costs.
Yeah. True story. So, Joe, what's your movie?
I am going to do a holiday movie, because we are getting into the season, and you are not going to be able to avoid them, so there'll be no point in reviewing them or suggesting them to you, because you'll have watched them 1,000 times. It would be Comedy Central's Christmas Story when Christmas comes around. They're probably airing it as I speak. 2003's Bad Santa.
Yeah. A sequel.
The sequel is out right now. Do not go see it.
Oh, have you seen it?
No. I've heard from reliable people that is the recycled trash that you'd expect it to be, that they missed the point of the first one and why it was good. I've heard it from people that have seen it. They're like, they completely missed why what made the first one at all charming in its sort of like, sort of raunchy sort of form of comedy that they used they completely missed the point. Of course, they missed the point of why that was successful in Bad Santa, as you expected them to do, and they just tried to cash in. But Bad Santa itself is actually a very good movie. It's actually very well constructed. It's actually very funny. The sort of form of comedy you kind of have to have a stomach for, I guess. It's a specific taste of comedy, but it's also the type of comedy that realizes that as much as we take it too far over the edge to the left, we are going to take it a little bit to the right in terms of heartwarming as well. And it still is conscious of the fact that it needs to not be the gross comedy the way that Anchorman is the stupid comedy, where it's like, at no point do we break our character tone of the movie. Like, this movie completely gives in to the fact that it still needs to pull at your emotional heartstrings. And it still does that. It still understands that it is a holiday movie. It needs to have some sort of holiday message, some sort of Christmas spirit added to it, some sort of message in it that makes you go, that's what this is about. That's the point of holidays. It's why we have holidays as a species. It's why we've even come up with the concept. That's, why Nick and I have said a million times why Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. It doesn't have the elements of the holidays. There's something about holidays that there's a moral purpose, there's a cultural purpose to holidays, and if your movie doesn't have those things, I think it was a year ago we did this, right? About Christmas movies and how, and if your movies don't have that, then they are not that. So Bad Santa could have just been this movie about a gross, fucking drunk, alcoholic Santa that it could have just appealed to idiot college students. But it didn't. It was careful. It was written carefully. It was made in such a way that it was sort of heartbreaking and sad. And it's also extremely funny along the way. Again, in probably about a week, you'll turn on the TV and you won't be able to get away from this movie. On Comedy Central or wherever the fuck. It's been turned into this sort of holiday movie for adults, that for some reason they want to show on cable, it's a quarter of the movie that it is on cable, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But anyways, and for that reason I say give this movie a watch, not on TV. Give this movie a watch in, its actual R-rated form, because it is a lot more enjoyable that way. And it's got Bernie Mac in it. Which is like, Bernie Mac.
All right.
You never go wrong with some good Bernie Mac. Rest in peace. So yeah. That's it.
Okay. I was waiting. You were like...
No, I thought maybe there'd be like some interesting trivia that I could pull up in this movie. There's nothing interesting. All the people that made it are boring.
Well, there you go. There's the first and last holiday recommendation.
Probably, yeah. I will probably just stay away from the holiday recommendations from now until the end of the new year.
Also should take some time, Joe. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes. This will be coming out on Thanksgiving for those of you that want to get away from your fucking family. Put your earbuds in and thank you for listening to us.
Yeah. So, happy National Gluttony Day. Mm-hmm. Enjoy, eat what you eat, and enjoy it. Yeah. So, I think that wraps up another thrilling adventure of the Insert Movie Reference Here podcast. What do you say, Joe?
Yes.
Good.
I'd say something like that. That's what I'd say.
And don't forget, other podcasts on the network. Mondays, Pavness Warm Gun. Tuesdays, Toxic Volume. Wednesdays, Scenario Store News. Thursdays, the podcast that you're listening to right now. Fridays, the original flagship Sinister DreamCast. And every third Saturday, Scenario Store News on the Scenario Store News feed. Black Emporium News. Also, to be note for this podcast, because we've talked about it, last week's episode of Sinister Dreamcast, we do our pop analysis of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, entitled Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go, which is it's an enjoyable listen, so I would recommend that for all you movie listeners out there.
There's a good example of a movie that fell into the backdrop of nostalgia for a long time, right?
Oh, we talk about that.
How long did an entire generation blindly subscribe to that being the best Turtles movie until they rewatched it after like 15 years of never seeing it?
Yeah. Oh, no, for real. Totally. So, if that's the case, I believe I'm Nick Kazina.
Then I believe I'm Joe Conniff.
See you next week. And scene. Knox.
You have been listening to the Sinister Dreamcast Network. For more from Sinister Dream Productions, check out www.sinisterdream.com.